Welcome to the Professionally Evil Perspective. I'm Nathan Sweeney.
I'm Kevin Johnson.
How you doing, Kevin?
I haven't decided yet. My head is killing me, and I did the weirdest presentation I think I've ever done.
The weirdest. Now that's
Yes,
that's a
I
wide
set
open.
the bar pretty high. No, yesterday the local ISACA group asked me to come out and speak. They actually paid us, which is even better. But instead, it was a one-day event. But instead of it being a day event, like a workshop, it was a really weird situation. They asked us if I could come and do a presentation, like an hour as part of this all day event.
Yeah.
And they said yes. And Andrew sent over like 6 or 7 topics that I could speak on. And somehow they came back and said, great, we want those 6. And so I ended up doing 6 different talks, but right in a row to the same group.
In an hour?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
Ooh, that would have been awesome.
I was like, wow, that would have been incredible.
No, it was like a 7-hour day.
Okay.
And I started in the morning and just went right
That's
through
awesome.
the day. We took a couple breaks to head lunch. But the weird part to me was it was the same group.
Yeah.
Like, which is good, like fine. But the hardest part for me was that I had to make sure that I hadn't told stories.
The same story.
The same stories. And it was made worse because like we were doing a talk in the morning about, bug bounties, let's say. And then they would ask me a question about something that would be something that would be covered like 3 talks later.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, okay, I'd like to talk about that now because you asked. But so it was even worse that, you know how often like people ask you a question and you'll be like, no, give me 3 slides and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
In this case, it wasn't 3 slides. It was give me 3 entire talks.
Right. We're going to cover that later. Yeah.
It was very, very weird. I found that it was harder than teaching a one-day class.
Yeah, I could see that. It seems similar to like when companies have us come in and do like the same 2-hour class like 3 times in a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, did I tell this story or did I use this example already in this session or was that the previous 2 sessions?
Yep.
I don't remember.
Yeah. And I want to be very clear for anybody listening. I am not complaining. I liked the fact that I was able to go and teach these people and help share knowledge and stuff like that. It was really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And they all seem to like it. I've gotten a bunch of feedback that people enjoyed it, which is good. But man, it sucked to do.
I a couple weeks ago, and the reason we missed an episode 2 weeks ago, we were at Wild West Hacking Fest. And I actually way west. Sorry, I always get that confused. Wild West Hacking Fest, way west. I met a fan. I actually had somebody come up and said they listened to the podcast and they really enjoy it.
I have a fan right over there.
Yeah, but your fan doesn't subscribe to the podcast.
No, my fan just blows air at me. Luckily, not hot air.
I will point out that this fan is also a customer/partner, so they're invested in the Professionally Evil ecosystem. But,
we have an ecosystem now. That's awesome.
Do.
I love it.
So shout out there to my mom and our other listener.
And just to be clear, in case you missed it, that was singular.
Awesome. So this morning, literally just a few hours ago, Jeff Stone with was it Bloomberg, I believe, broke a story, put out a tweet that here's this thing, and you showed it to me. I think it's a great topic. You want to summarize and then we'll dive in from there.
Wall Street Journal.
Was it Wall Street? No, I think he's formerly Wall Street Journal. I think he's.
Oh, you're right. It does say previously.
Yeah,
okay.
He's the cyber editor. Yep. He's the editor for Bloomberg Business.
Okay, for the people, it's Jeff Stone 500 on Twitter. We'll put it in the notes or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, so the tweet he did, and there's an entire thread that I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but basically, here's his tweet. I'm gonna quote the tweet. DOJ is instructing U.S. prosecutors not to bring charges under anti-hacking law, CFAA is what we're talking about here, for, quote, good faith, end quote, cybersecurity research. It's a big update for the controversial Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which was used to prosecute Aaron Schwartz. And then he says there's a further story coming, everything else like that. Further down the thread, they link to Wired and all this kind of stuff. And so
there is another article that came out just shortly after that, a full article. We'll link to that as well, that goes into a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So I think this is really interesting for a few reasons. One, and I'm going to be blunt. I personally believe the CFAA has needed to be updated for years, decades even. Very often, and anybody who listens to me speak other places or here knows that I'm not a big fan of creating laws that are specific to things that are already covered by other things. But we have had abuses of the CFAA, both by people doing bad stuff and by prosecutors that have leveraged it to, overcharge, do whatever, stuff like that. So I like to see things happening. What really irritates me.
Hold on, real quick. Yeah. Before we get to that, let me summarize for folks that aren't familiar. The CFAA is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was passed, I think, in 1986. Is that right? The same year that Top Gun came out, and then Nintendo and
how did I know Top Gun was going to be
this Macintosh Plus? I don't know. I've got my tickets for next Tuesday. I'm just saying. I don't know if everybody's going to the.
Isn't Kathy going to have to wait until Wednesday or something? Is what I think.
The official release is Friday, but I'm going to a pre-release event, so kind of excited.
Oh, it's not Kathy. It's Susan. Susan is the one that's no longer speaking to you because
exactly.
A day later.
Exactly. So the problem, or the value of the CFAA, depending on which side you fall on this, is that it's very vague. It basically says that it's against the law to use a system without authorization. I'm greatly simplifying it. But the advantage of that is it makes it very easy for prosecutors to say, clearly you didn't have authorization, so this was a crime. It also makes it very easy for people to go overboard and prosecute things that probably shouldn't be a crime. And to the abuses that you're talking about. So I just wanted to kind of level set there. So you were saying, what were you saying? Your biggest irritation with this?
My biggest irritation with what happened this morning was that we have now had to depend on an executive branch decision, the DOJ, that to fix something that has needed to be fixed. And we all know what that means, is that at any time, this current administration or any future administration may revert back to a different way of enforcing it, right? Like we have not fixed the law. We have adjusted how the law is used. And that's one of my big irritations here. On the flip side of it, the thing that I think we should talk about here, because that's just a Kevin complaining about how politics work.
Well, I think there's more to that before we move on to the flip side. Okay. In this situation, it's not that different than several other big issues, right? Like immigration is one of those things where Congress has not done anything to change immigration laws. And so what we have is either A, the Supreme Court deciding this is allowed or this isn't allowed, or B, the current administration saying this is how we're going to enforce that. What I think is interesting about this point is this is guidance from the Department of Justice on how they are going to enforce this law. This doesn't necessarily apply to states. It doesn't necessarily apply to, municipal situations. And my understanding is it doesn't necessarily apply to all federal cases as well. Like this is their guidance, right? But that can be superseded by the situation or the circumstances or stuff like that. Is that right?
You can still get sued for something. You can still, right? Like this really is just like hey, we think you shouldn't do this, so don't.
Yeah.
To the prosecutors,
it's at least an acknowledgement from the government that hey, there's a problem here, and this is a little bit, it's being used inappropriately in some cases.
Yeah, I think the other problem with it from a government perspective, and from that perspective, is it's approaching good faith things, and who defines what's in good faith, right?
Yeah.
And by that I mean the good faith hacker. Okay, what's a good faith hacker? I've often said that security researcher is another name often for criminal.
Yeah.
Because somebody got caught doing something bad and they said, no, I was doing research, right? So how do you differentiate that from somebody like Josh Wright or Charlie Miller, who are actually doing good research and finding stuff? And when I say how do you, I mean the prosecutor that really doesn't understand this stuff anyways.
Yeah.
Right. Very often when I've dealt with, the, government prosecutors and whatever, they don't really understand the technology they have to determine whether they can prosecute on.
Right.
And so if they don't understand the technology, who is guiding them as to whether or not they should do it?
Well, we saw that recently in Missouri as well, right? Where we've talked about that already previously. A reporter was basically notified by somebody of, here's this issue with the Department of Education site. You can download personal details of educators and whatnot. And they reported it. And the governor just went all up in arms because he didn't really understand the situation, the issue. And then he doubled down on, hey, we're going to prosecute, and, this is a violation, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's clearly someone that was acting in the best interest. They reported it. They did everything the right way.
In our opinion, the right way. I want to.
Well, yeah. Based on what we know, based on the evidence.
Well, no. And the reason I say that is because, like me, I'm a very big fan of full disclosure. I believe that if you have a vulnerability that is going to impact lots of people, and the only way to get attention to it is to disclose it, you disclose it. I'm okay with that, right? Obviously, there's qualifiers there and all that kind of stuff, but that's why I say is, in my opinion, they did it the right way. There are a large portion of our industry that believe that any type of disclosure is bad.
That's true. And this is one of those issues where we get into, we've touched on a little bit already, the difference between the law and ethics, right? There are things that are wrong, big W wrong ethically. And that tends to be a little bit more of an individual decision, or as a society, we decide this is wrong. And then there are things that are maybe little W wrong because they're illegal. I don't know if I got the big and little W's mixed up there, but
I think you did. I think you got it backwards, but that's okay. I think
I don't know
what you mean. I've said many times, right? Kevin Mitnick was an ethical hacker. Why? Because it met his ethics.
His ethics.
I was also a criminal. Yeah, he's also a criminal. I think he should be a criminal. I think what he did was wrong. I think he's scum. But when we use the words ethical hacker, it's kind of dumb, which brings me to my second problem with the way this change is being presented, both by Jeff Stone and by many people I've seen retweeted, comment on it, the social commentary, if you may, is everybody's talking about how this is going to protect white hat hackers. And I have an issue with that phrasing, because the definition of a white hat hacker is somebody who isn't violating any rules. Right. Now, I absolutely know that we have white hat hackers who have gotten in trouble. That reporter that you're talking about, I would say they fell under white hat with that, and they still got in trouble, right? But the vast majority of the people that are being used as examples were not white hat hackers. And, Aaron Schwartz comes to mind as one of the people that they're all using as a reference. While I agree with what Aaron did, while I like that what he did was how he did it, I think there's two problems with calling him a white hat hacker. One, he wasn't following the rules. And two, he purposely tried to hide what he was doing because he knew that people would see what he was doing as bad. And so I think that calling him a white hat hacker, no matter how much you, whatever, may like what he did, it's a misnomer. You're using the phrase wrong. And the reason I think that's important is, if you go to somebody who disagrees with changing the CFAA and say, this protects white hat hackers, they can correctly say, if you're a white hat hacker, the CFAA isn't something you should worry about.
Yeah, right? I don't like, I think, and we could probably spend a whole episode on the Aaron Schwartz case. I disagree a little bit there. I think he was going well beyond both the legal and the ethical side of what is appropriate.
I would argue that he was following his ethics.
He was following his ethics. He is violating what I would consider to be okay. I'm in that situation. I think the Van Buren ruling is a little bit more of a better case, and that wasn't quite as big a deal. Basically, there were some researchers at the University of Michigan that were doing investigations into Facebook and Google and LinkedIn and all this, on how they, I don't remember the details. I think it had something to do with discrimination and some of the algorithms on the back end.
Yep. And were the algorithms discriminating?
Exactly. And to do those studies, I mean, these were actual students at the University of Michigan. To do those studies, they violated the terms of service of those platforms. And there was a Supreme Court case just recently. It might have been this week even. Oh no, it was last year, I guess.
I was going to say I didn't think it was recent.
I couldn't remember. I read an article about it this week.
We all know that it's still March 2020.
It feels like it. Yeah, I think we're up to like April 2020 at this point.
Yeah. So last
basically
year
yesterday.
Was still recently. And,
but no. In that case, the Supreme Court ruled that, to your point earlier, the prosecutors went overboard. Right? Yeah. They used the CFAA, and it was not appropriate in that case. Let's back up for just a minute. Can the CFAA be fixed? Is it? And I'm gonna present a scenario to you, because I'm not sure it can, and I'm not sure what we have is the worst. Well, I know it's not the worst. I'm not sure.
No, I was going to say, it's definitely not the worst, but don't challenge them to do that.
Right. I'm not sure that we can get better, and here's why I'm going to say that. The technology and the situation, the details are so complicated and they change so quickly that I'm not sure that 535 people in DC can understand the situation well enough and build a relevant update to the CFAA that will actually be useful. 636.
Why? Yeah, because to fix the CFAA, you need both the House, Congress, Senate, and the president to sign. So
536, because there's 435 representatives, 100 senators.
Why did I think it was 535? You're right. I'm sorry.
That 536. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. But the president would have to agree as well. But I mean, that's the question. Like, I'm not convinced, because we all know that a law like that is going to be passed around by all the aides, and then all the lobbyists are going to get involved,
and then the money's going to get involved, and everything else.
And you're going to have a quadrillion-page bill that nobody reads.
Here's why I disagree with you.
We have to vote on it before we can read it.
And I know that we disagree I know that you and I disagree on this.
Okay.
Or we have in the past. I think the CFAA can be fixed. And the way I think you fix it is by repealing it.
Just get rid of it completely?
Yep. And here's why. I'm not saying that we should have no cyber laws, for the lack of a better term, because I just heard the word cyber law come out of my mouth and I cringed. We already have laws. You know it's illegal to steal stuff?
Yeah. Here's the problem: is applying those laws to situations like this just gets us back in the even more vague situation.
No, see, I disagree. And here's why. Let's use the Van Buren case and the existing laws. If the CFAA didn't exist, right? If you violate the terms of service of a corporation, the existing laws, ignoring the CFAA, does not make you a criminal. That's a civil issue.
Okay.
The company needs to determine whether they're willing to sue you and deal with it that way.
Sure.
Right? So it's covered.
Yeah.
And if you read the Supreme Court decision, that is what they say, is that was a civil suit. Now we look at Aaron Schwartz. Mm-hmm. Aaron Schwartz downloaded, and I'm simplifying this greatly. So, right, he downloaded stuff that he had access to. He then published that stuff so other people could do it, which would be the same, theoretically, as going and making a copy of a video and giving it to other people. So it's theft.
I would think it would fit, and I'm not a lawyer, but is that where it becomes aggravated because of the amount? Like, he downloaded millions of documents. You know what I mean? There is a point where it becomes a felony instead of a misdemeanor because of the quantity.
I'm not a lawyer either, except on Facebook, where my social media law degree made me an expert. I don't know the difference. Yeah. I'm just saying that the laws against theft, if we chose to prosecute that, I would not have chosen to prosecute that, but if we chose to prosecute it, those laws would have fallen. It would have fallen under those. And that's why I say is I agree 100% with your statement that the idea of 536 people, or if we just bring another random 100 to make me right.
I mean, the lobbyists have to be included in there somewhere, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. That was absolutely what I meant. So you're absolutely right. By the time those idiots come up with a law, the technology is going to change.
It'll be outdated.
There's something new, like that. And that's why I say is I don't think the right answer is to have a law that says don't hack stuff. What we do is we use the laws that we already have in place, and we allow the civil system to handle the rest of it.
Yeah,
which is the way that the law is supposed to work.
from a libertarian perspective, I agree with you. I think there's cases like the Weave case back with the AT&T iPad thing 10 years ago or whenever it was. I think that's an example that might, I don't know that he would have been prosecuted or found guilty under current law outside of the CFAA. That the situation there was registering a new iPad, the new iPad. Remember when they changed that? It's not the iPad 2, it's the new iPad.
Because new.
Yeah, when they basically it made a call to an AT&T site, and we've found out that you could, did an interception proxy and said, hey, if I just change this integer value for this user, I can download the personal details of all this information, all these users. The question there ultimately came down to, did he have authorization to do this or not? They did not try to prosecute him for theft because it was a publicly available website that all he did was download it. And so they found him guilty of stealing this information without authorization, but it wasn't a theft type of criminal act. No. I don't know if that would apply.
As much as I hate to say this, because I think Weave is a scumbag, and I like the idea of Weave going to jail.
Yeah.
But we should not be putting people in jail just because Kevin thinks they should go to jail.
I don't know. In this case, I would be okay with that.
I know you would. That's what I'm saying is, I actually think, while I do not like who Weave is, I don't like what he stands for, and I damn straight don't like what he did, because actually, no, let me start over again. He would not have been charged with theft. What he would have been charged with was blackmail and extortion. Because if you recall correctly...
Yeah, he tried.
He downloaded the stuff, and then he contacted AT&T, supposedly.
Yeah, I think he tried to sell it to reporters first, and then he tried to sell it to AT&T.
No, other way around.
Other way around? Okay.
He tried to sell... Well, let me rephrase that. Obviously, I wasn't involved, but my understanding is he reached out to AT&T and said, if you don't give me money, I'm going to let people know I did this. And they said, screw you, hippie, and they called the FBI. And while that was going around, Mr. Self-Proclaimed Nazi contacted reporters, offered to sell it to them, then finally released it. But if he had not tried to extort anybody, I think it still falls under what I just said.
Yeah.
He violated AT&T's rules, which means AT&T was responsibility. I have an issue with the idea that because somebody did something AT&T didn't like.
Yeah.
And I'll be blunt, I didn't like what he did either. But why are we allowing corporations to use police to enforce their contracts?
Yeah, in that case, I don't think it was so much the enforcing the corporations it wasn't the corporations using the law to enforce contracts. I think it was more of, because the corporation messed up, civilians were injured, right? Personal details of those people were stolen by this individual. Yes, should AT&T be held accountable for that? Absolutely. Like, they screwed up. It's their fault. They were involved, whatnot. They allowed it to happen. But that's the idea of, criminal fines against this user, because it shouldn't be up to AT&T to enforce the protection of the citizens who were lost.
But then what we do is we start passing laws to say that if you reveal information that isn't yours, that's against the law. That's not a technology law.
That's HIPAA, FERPA,
right. I mean, that's
Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is we already have laws about revealing that type of information. If we've had gone to the AT&T dumpsters and grabbed a printout that somebody threw away of every single one of those customers, I know how unreasonable I'm giving this.
Sure, but it's a scenario.
And he scanned it in and published on the internet, would that have changed what he was prosecuted for?
That's a good question.
Because that would not have been a CFAA violation, but would violate the privacy laws.
It might have. I mean, it's like anything with the law. The question would be, it depends, and it would come down to the particulars. Yeah. I could see a scenario where, in most cases, dumpster diving would be okay, but in this case, if you did it without authorization and there were consequences to it, somebody would try to find that. That would definitely be an interesting court case.
Yeah. And that's why I say is that really what we have here is we should go back to, let's pass laws that are technology agnostic. Because if you're doing it with technology or you're doing it with a gun, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I fall down. If we need more laws about protecting data, privacy laws, things like that, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but fine, pass those laws. But don't try to pass a law that takes into account specific technologies, because that's going to fail. It's doomed to fail.
I think for me, I think I would disagree, because I think the difficulty of the way our justice system is set up, where we have thousands and thousands of prosecutors who in many cases are elected. They may not even be qualified, but they're the best option at the time. Or they're appointed for, whatever reason. Those people trying to, since they're the ones trying to decide, does this apply or does it not, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a value in having more specific laws in some cases like this. It's weird that I'm saying the CFAA is the more specific law, because
I get it.
There's some irony there, but this leads into another topic that we don't have time for today, but I want to pursue in the future, is the idea of software liability, and not just software, but systems in general. Should AT&T be held liable because they had a flaw that allowed that data to be breached? I think that's a topic we should cover in the future. Because I do
think that we should wrap this one up, because I think we're
right at our time. Yeah. Because our end time is roughly here to here. As long as we get in the roughly here to here time frame, we're good.
We're good.
Awesome,
man. I appreciate it.
Yep. We'll chat next time. Bye.
I've already read.